Hello, testing. All right, welcome to the Beginners Python and Machine Learning Meetup number 57. So what we've going to do today is create a web application, and we're going to use Dash to do that. So the way Dash works, it does a lot of it uses JavaScript and the React framework to make a very interactive web page, and you can do it all on a single page. It's probably the easiest way to create a web application from Python, but it's still quite difficult. So I'll as I'm going along, just let me know in the YouTube chat or in Slack if you've got any problems. So I'm just checking. If you can hear me okay, just let me know in the chat. I might be looking at the wrong. Oh, good. So Andrew says he can hear me fine. That's great. So I'll keep going. All right, so if you look at the YouTube page, I've put a link to my GitHub repository. And so I've got all the source code in GitHub at the moment. So it means you can go through this without actually having to type anything, but it will use Git to jump through the project into different stages. I've set them all up into 9 different tasks. So you can jump to a particular stage and try writing it yourself, and then you can compare it to my solution. And they don't have to be exactly the same. You can do something slightly different as well. So if you go to the GitHub repository, you'll see that link in the YouTube, below the YouTube video, will take you to here. And there's a link here that lets you clone or download, which is what we want to do. We want to clone the repository. And so that link in here is actually the same as the link that I've given you. It's just got .git written on the end of it. Now I'm assuming you've got Python 3 installed on your computer, and you've got Git already installed on your computer. So we're going to clone that using those. I'm going to copy this by clicking on here. So now I've copied that to my clipboard, and now I can go to my terminal, change directory. I'll just make it a bit bigger. Projects, no, I'll call it, I'll just go to documents. And I just type git clone and that URL that I've copied from GitHub, which is that same URL with just .git on the end. And that copies all the source code down onto my local computer. Now I can change into that directory. And I can have a look at it. Let's have a look at it first. So I'm on a Mac, so I'm running the bash script. So this will be the same on Linux and Mac. If you were on Windows, you'd now be typing dir for directory. And you can see there's the full project. So that's the completed project. We don't want to start there, we want to start right at the beginning. So we're just going to check out task 1. And then if I have a look at where I am. I've just got a couple of files. It's just a README file, a tasks file, and these Git files. Okay, now if you want to see what I've just been typing and maybe adapt it to your particular computer, on this GitHub website I've put the instructions just to how to get started. So you can see I've changed directory into a directory. I did documents, but later I will be using Pycharm projects. I cloned the repository. I changed into that directory where the repository was, and I checked out task 1. So these are the things that we want to have installed on our computer. Python 3.8 or 3.6 or later will be fine. So it can be installed from python.org, or if you've got Anaconda, that should be fine as well. We're going to install Git from gitscm.com, and I'm going to mostly be using an IDE from Pycharm, the Pycharm Community Edition. So let me know if you have any problems doing this on the command line, or if you'd like to, if you've got Pycharm installed, you can follow what I'll do now to do the same thing using Pycharm, which is a bit easier, I think. So when I start up Pycharm, I get the welcome screen, and I'll say get from version control, and that's where I put in that URL. So it's github.com. TimCU is my area on GitHub. The name of the project is bpaml for Beginners Python and Machine Learning -graph.git, and I want it to go, I'll put that into Pycharm projects. In fact, I'll look, Pycharm projects, and if I'd done that before, which was the default, it would have automatically put this name in for me. And that's the name of the project. So we'll clone that, and that'll start it up in my IDE. It hardly took any time at all to clone, so that's good. And there's the README file. And the next thing we do is check out task 1, and these are the instructions if you're using Pycharm. So we just want to go to the VCS menu, which is version control system, git, branches, checkout tag or revision, and we just start typing task 1. There we go. So now if I look at my tasks, we'll see there's only one task in the task list because we're at task 1. And if I look at the README, this is the README that you can see on the GitHub site, which has got all the instructions on how to get started. Yes, for task 1. All right, so the next thing we have to do is we have to create a virtual environment. So you really, whenever you're doing a Python project, you should create a virtual environment specifically for that project, so you don't have your different environments affecting each other, because the virtual environment is where you install your third-party libraries and even different versions of Python. So we want to have we want to know exactly how to create an environment so that your program will run on someone else's computer. So we follow a very strict way of creating the virtual environment. You can do this from the command line. On Windows, you type Python-m, which means use the module called venv, and then you give your virtual environment a name. Now I've just called it venv, and that's a pretty common thing to call it. It's just going to go into the same directory that this bpaml-dash-graph directory. If you're on Mac or Linux, they often have Python 2 installed as Python, so to run Python 3, if you've got that installed, you have to say Python 3-m then venv. And if you're using Anaconda, you can create virtual environments this way. The Anaconda virtual environments are all stored in one spot by default, so you have to give it a name that's specific to your project. So we'll call it venv for the dash-graph project, and you can also say what sort of project it's going to be. So this was going to be a Python project, and you could also specify Anaconda there if you want it to have the full Anaconda area, or you can even specify there Python and a version number. So you say Python equals 3.6 or something like that if you specifically want Python 3.6. Okay, but we're going to do it using, we're going to use Pycharm to create our virtual environment. So I've got the instructions down here for Pycharm, and so we'll do it using preferences. And then we go down to our project, and it's asking you which Python interpreter do we want to use. It's currently set up for no interpreter. So let's have a look at them. I created one before, but I'll create a new one. So let's add one. It'll go into the, see by default it uses venv, this is what I used before, as the name, and it'll go into our project directory as a subdirectory. So if you look over here, this is our project directory, bpaml-dash-graph. It's got no subfolders in there at the moment. Our base interpreter, we're choosing Python 3.8. This will be probably in a different location on my computer than on yours, but we're choosing a new environment. Now if you've got Anaconda, don't use virtual env environment, use conda environment. Let's have a look what that looks like. So you have to specify where your conda is to make that all work. I don't have Anaconda on this machine, so we'll just go back to this one for mine. Okay, as you see there, the venv virtual environment got created, and it's showing up in our list. They put a 2 because I've already got one with that name. And we'll say OK. And it's set up. It just has a couple of things installed in it, pip and setup tools. But we'll want to install a few more things because we're going to be using Dash and a couple of other libraries. So let's have a look how we do that. Now for Pycharm, that's now activated. If I look in terminal here, I can see the name of the active virtual environment is in parentheses at the beginning of the command line, and that's venv. So if you were doing this from a terminal, you now have to activate. So there's different ways to activate your virtual environment. On Windows command prompt, you run venv, which is the name of the folder that you've created, bin activate.bat. For PowerShell, there's got an activate.ps1. For Mac or Linux, you have to run source and then venv/activate. Actually, that should be /bin/activate. And Anaconda, you've got conda activate venv-graph. Once it's, so that's active for me, yep. Now we want to install our third-party libraries. Now, to make it easier, I've put all the names of the third-party libraries into this requirements.txt. So it's Dash. We're going to use Dash for creating the web application. We're going to use Plotly to draw a graph. We're going to use Pandas and NumPy to process some data. Now Pycharm's really clever. It knows that anything I put in requirements.txt I probably want to install, so it's just given me the option here to install those requirements. So I click on install requirements. Which ones? Yep, all of them. I'll install them. I can ignore that extension, don't need that. Okay, so I'm watching the chat to see if I'm going too fast or if you've got any questions. So please feel free to ask questions while this is happening. If I look down the bottom, you see installing package. That says very small type, so you may not see it. They've got a progress bar here showing as it goes through. There we go. All successfully installed. So to do that, it's gone out to the internet, found all those third-party libraries. I haven't specified any version numbers here, so it's just grabbed the latest version of each one of those things. It's also worked out that these libraries depend on other third-party libraries, so anything that they depend on, it's installed as well. And these are all open source projects, so it means that it can do that all automatically. If I go back into Pycharm preferences and I look at my Python interpreter, remember there were just two things here installed before, and now it's installed all these other things that our four libraries depend on. You can see our four libraries. We've got Pandas, NumPy, Plotly, and Dash. And then we've got all these others like Flask. So Flask is what is used to build the web application templates. Ginger is for the templating, and yeah, a lot of this is Flask stuff. Okay. So look at our task 1, setting up the environment. We've done Python, Git, and we've got our IDE. We've cloned the repository. We've set up the virtual environment. And we've checked, so now our last thing to do is check out task 2. So I could go up to VCS, Git, branches, like I did last time, and check out a branch, or I can just type it here in the terminal. So let's try it from the terminal this time. Check out, let's see, task 2. Okay. So you can see up here we've got another file has arrived. If I look at my tasks list, we've now got another task in our task list, and we've gone to the second version. So has anyone had any trouble checking out tasks? The tasks are put in the file as tags, and when I first committed the Git repository, I didn't upload the tags by default, so I've put them up there now. But if you downloaded that Git repository more than an hour ago, then you won't have those tags. All right, we're going to do our first Dash application. So here's the instructions. I recommend you look at this tutorial on dash.plotly.com. And what we want to do, we just want to create a simple layout with an H1, that's an HTML H1 tag, and a single div element. And then we're going to run the application from the command line. Or we can run it from within the IDE, this integrated development environment. And once we've done that, we're going to use Git to save our changes. So we'll save them, we'll create our own branch, and these will be your changes that you'll be saving. So my task 2 attempt will be the name of the branch. You can't have any spaces in there, so you could do underscores if you wanted, but I've just done it all as continuous text. And then you commit your changes to that solution. Then you can check out task 3, and task 3 will have that my solution in there, and you can do a diff between those two to see what's changed between task 2 and task 3. So you can see what has been typed in for the solution. Okay, so the first, I'll just work through this so you can do the same that I'm doing. How am I going to do this? I've got a file here. This is my Python file where I'm going to put it. But it's empty at the moment, so I need to put stuff into there. So I'll go back to my tasks. I'll copy this URL and I'll go to my web browser and let's have a look at what's there. Okay, so this is the Plotly Dash tutorial. We're in the layout section and it tells us what we need to create a program. So let's see, get started. We'll create a file named app.py. We've called it something different. So I always like doing something a bit different to the tutorial so we can see what's important and what's not. And let's just copy all the code that's there. Copy that. And we'll paste that into our .py file. So what's this one going to do? It creates the application, it sets the layout of the application, and it uses that using these this library here, -HTML components, and we're just going to abbreviate that to HTML. And in there they've got a Python class for every one of the HTML components, and in each one we can provide the information to make it display. So we're going to put a div on the outside. Inside that div we're going to put in an h1 followed by another div. So you can see the children of this top div is a list that starts there, just hide this, and ends down there. And it's got 3 things in it. It's got an h1, a div, and a graph. We didn't need the graph for our task 1, but we'll leave it there for the moment just to see what it looks like. And that's it. So now we then it does app.run server debug equals true. Now the advantage of debug equals true means we can make changes to this program while it's still running, and it will just refresh it for us. The reason for this line here, if name equals main, that's a way you can tell if your Python file is being run has been imported as a module, or it's being just run as a Python script. So if name equals main, we're just running it as a Python script, and that's when we do want it to run the server. If it's been imported as a module, we don't want to run the server. Okay, so let's run that. So on my computer, that's just Control-Shift-R, and that just runs. So it gives us these URLs, 127.0.0.1, which is the IPv4 address for your own computer. We're coming in on port 8050, and it's showing us an H1. It's showing us a div, and it's showing us a nice pretty graph, and this is an interactive graph, and that's what Plotly is really renowned for, is these graphs. So we can hover over them. It gives us information about the values. So at point 1 we've got 2 of Montreal and 4 for San Francisco, and we've got these things we can zoom in on parts of it. We can hide parts of it. We can reset it back. We can hide it all. We can just show Montreal. We can show San Francisco. We can even what can we do? Zoom in like that. All right, so let's go. We don't want the graph for now, so let's take that out. We'll go back to our code. And so we had this list, had 3 items, we only want 2, so we'll take the code out, the last item out, which is this DCC graph, because all we were testing at the moment was our HTMLs. So H1 and a div. So we'll save that. And you see when I saved it, in the run there, it just restarted, reloaded the application. And if I go back to my Google Chrome, I can see it's now refreshed without the graph being there at all. If I press F12, I can see what the code looks like. So we've got a div. Let's see, so let's find out exactly where this stuff is. There we go. So there's our div. We've got an H1 and we've got a div, is what we've created using our Python program. And all this other stuff is just structure that Dash has put around our program to make it work and do a few more things. So it can do things like we've got this debug one here which says currently showing errors or hide errors. We've even got callback graph so you can see when things are happening. And we'll just close that for now. All right, is anyone having trouble getting this Dash application to run? Because it's quite an achievement to get that working, but there's a lot of things required to be in place for you to get that to work. So let me know if you're having trouble with that. Okay, we'll go back to our tasks. Now we're going to use Git to save what we've just done. So we can do this from the command line. So if I go into terminal, it's currently saying I've checked this out, head is now at this position, and which if I look at Git status, that just tells me what files I've modified. I modified the README.md because I found that mistake in it, and this is the Python file that we've changed. So the first thing I need to do if I want to save these changes is check out a new branch so that I can work on that. So to do that, I use checkout, and by putting -b, it'll create a new branch, and we're going to call it my task 2 attempt. That's right, so we switch to that branch, and then I want to commit those files. So I need to add them and commit them, or I can use this the -a, which means add them while I'm committing them. And the -m just says I'm going to give a message to the commit, which is basically my task 2 solution. There we go. This is the first time I've used it over here, so it wants me to say who I am. So let's create these. That's my email address. And these sort of things you only set once, so I've been using Git for ages and not having to set these in another user, but I now have to do it in this account. All right, so now I should be able to do my commit, and it'll be able to assign my name to those changes. All right, if I do a git log, it shows me all the where I currently am, and I just keep going, all the things that have happened to the files in this Git repository. And Pycharm actually gives me a log. I can look at the log and see where I am. So we've got the initial commit, add task 2, add empty Python file task 2, and then this one here is where we've branched out on a new branch all the way up to the top here, my task 2 solution, which is what I've created, bypassing all these other changes. So at the moment we're on this branch, my task 2 attempt, and we want to go into this other branch, task 3. Well, task 3 is actually a tag, but we're using it. That's where we'll check out to. I'll press Q to get rid of that and check out task 3. And it says I'm in a detached head state, which is you don't. It's a little unusual. What we're doing with Git here is that we're working on old tags in the file when the program has progressed quite a long way. And so that's why we're in a detached head state, which just means that we're down here. So this yellow is the head, the grey is the task 3. So we've moved the yellow to here, which means that's where we're checked out to. And it's detached. It's not really on any branch. The branch that it's on has actually gone further. So it's not really useful. It's basically saying if you want to save any of your changes, you need to create a new branch, and then you can you won't be in a detached head state. Okay, and if we want to see what's different between task 2 and task 3, we can see we've created all this file here. We've created this other file, DataCache, which is actually part of task 3. So what we're looking at here is the task 2 solution and what's required for task 3. So this is all required for task 3. And I've even fixed up some of the instructions. Okay. So plus means it's a line that's been added. Yeah, they've all been lines that have been added. Okay, so now we're in task 3. We've got task 3 here. What we need to do now is create a drop-down menu for a list of countries. So if you remember from Meetup 53, where we were drawing graphs of COVID-19 data, we were getting the data from a Johns Hopkins GitHub site, and we could look up the data for the different cases, the confirmed cases, the recoveries, and the deaths. And for each of those, we had a list of countries and a list of dates, and it would give us the data on any particular day. So I've taken the code that we did in Meetup 53 and I've put it into this DataCache.py file, and this is it here. So we've created a default case type, which will be the confirmed. We're going to be using pandas library, which is why we needed to import it before into requirements. And we're creating a class. Now all this class is a cache directory, a cache object. So we're just going to use a dictionary to cache our results, and in that dictionary we're going to look for it by case type, and then the case type is going to store another dictionary in it which will have the data frame, which we'll call df, and a timestamp so we'll know when it was we actually retrieved it from Johns Hopkins. So by calling this method on the class, give us the dict for the case type, then it will go to, it will first see if it's been done before. If it hasn't, then it will create the URL, read the CSV from that URL, store it as a data frame in a dictionary, and then put that dictionary into this dictionary called DCT, and then return that dictionary, which has got the DF and the timestamp, the data frame. We're really mostly interested in just the data frame, so we've got another method that just returns the data frame, calls that, and then just returns the data frame. Or if we're interested in the timestamp, we can use that. Sometimes we might want to refresh the data. If our program is running for several days, they might have new data, so we just clear the cache, and then any further requests will get new data. And we've got some additional data here. We can get a data frame for a particular location, which is nice, which includes the country or the state, and series sum, these are things that we needed when we were drawing the graph in Meetup 53. And so I've just put those functions for us in as convenience functions in this data cache. Okay, so I'll go back to here. That's how DataCache works. We want to get all the unique countries from column country region in the data frame, and we want to sort the countries in place, and then we want to create an HTML label with the text country, and create a drop down to do that. Okay, so if we remember, so what I might do, I'll copy task 3, into our code here, so we can see what we're supposed to be doing. And I'll just comment that, so I'll select that and Command / that comments it, so we can see what we need to do. We'll create, okay, we need to get a data frame using DF for case type. Okay. So we need the data cache, and so to get that we need to import it. Now it's in a separate file here, so we can just say import data cache. Okay, so we've created a variable that will store that cache by creating it based on that class. Then we want to get a data frame for a case type, and we'll just use the default one of confirmed DF for case type. And you see how it's actually doing command completion in the IDE. It's worked out because we referred to DataCache here that we can use that function straight away. And that'll give us the data frame. Now we want okay, so what do we put into DataCache? This file here, DataCache, I've created that. We don't need to make any changes there, but we're going to use it. So what it is, it's a class called DataCache, and so we are just going to create an object of that class. And the way we create an object of that class is by calling the class name with parentheses at the end, and that creates an object. And we're going to store that object in data. So really it's just going to be a class that's got an empty dictionary in it, and so that should be quite quick. Then we were going to call DF for case type, on that data cache, it's going to go and look and go, oh, there's no data already stored in this cache, so I'm going to need to go off to the web and retrieve it. And so all these methods, this method that I had in DataCache, DCT for case type, is going to do that for me. So it's all behind the scenes. I remembered how to do it in Meetup 53, so I don't really need to know how to do it now. I'm just confident that it will get it for me. So that's going to create a data frame for me. And it's going to give me the confirmed cases because I haven't specified even a case type here. I could have put confirmed in there, but I'll just leave it blank because confirmed was the default value. And it will give me a data frame of all the confirmed cases. Then I want to get all the unique countries from column country region in that data frame. So if you remember how to get a column from a data frame, we just use the square bracket notation. So these are pandas data frames. And we can get country to region. And that will give me a column of all the countries and regions in the data frame, but some of them will be repeated. So I want the unique ones. So to do that, I can call the unique function on here. So I want the unique countries, and that will return a NumPy array of countries. So let's say we'll call it AR country, and we'll store that in the variable AR country. Then I want to sort those countries in place. So I just call the sort method. And that's a method on the NumPy array. And if you're unsure about these, you can put some extra print statements in so that when it runs, you can see what it is you've got. You can look at the types of things. And that's it. So we've got our NumPy array of sorted countries. Now we're going to create a drop-down. So let's go back to our dash.plotly website. The layout one we were on. And we'll find the bit about drop-downs. So I'm just going to do find drop down. Okay. And here we go. We've got an example of how to do a drop down. So let's copy that example and put that into our code. So let's read our instructions. We just want to put the label is going to be country. So that's using an HTML label. I'll call that country. And the drop down is going to have an ID, a value, and the options. So the options is going to be a list of dictionaries for the countries. Label is what is shown, value is what is returned to the app. So you can see it's going to have one of those for Australia, one for New Zealand. It's going to have all these dictionaries in this list, and each one's going to have a label and a value. We're just going to use the label and value to be the same things. You could use different things. I'll just hide this. So in their example, they were using labels of the long names, so that's what's going to show on the website, and values, they're using short names, is what's going to be returned to their application. So they're using NYC for the value. but we're happy to use the long names for both. Okay. So we'll give it, we'll fix this error here first. So dcc.dropdown, DCC is their abbreviation for dash core components. We haven't imported that, so let's import that as DCC. I should leave that on the screen a bit longer for you before I scroll off. So import dash core components as DCC. And hopefully you've got all this code here for sorting the country. And I'll delete some of these task things that we've already done. Created that. Okay, so AR country is going to give us all the countries, but we need to create these dictionaries. So to do that, we can use list comprehension. So to do list comprehension, you start your list, you start creating what you want to put in the list. So we're going to do a dictionary that's going to have a label with a country name in it. And we're going to have a value that's going to also have the country name in it. All right, and then to do list comprehension, we use a for loop to just say where it's going to get all these values from. So for country in AR country. Okay. And the other things we needed to specify is we wanted an ID. We want it to be input country. We're not using the ID yet, but we will. And the original value, we want it to be blank because we don't want the initial selection, we want nothing selected originally. Okay, let me know if I'm going too fast. But I think that's all we need to do there. So let's try running it. Is it still running? It says it's still running, so it might even actually have already updated for us. So let's go see if that's happened. There we go. So we've got our label country, and there's all the different countries that are in that data file. And we can choose one, or we can choose another one, or we can clear it. There's a little X over here we can clear. So did anyone have any success getting that drop-down menu to work? I'll go back to the code so you can see the code. And I can delete all that. Yep, I can still fit the whole code on the screen at once. So let me know in the chat if there's anything that you've noticed while you're doing this that you think might be useful for something else that you're doing. So these ones here, HTML.h1 and div and label, they're all straight HTML components, so that's why they're in the HTML library. Other ones like a drop-down menu, that's not in the way we're showing this is not using HTML components, so that's been put in a different library, the dash core components library, and that gives us different information. So when you select changes in that, it can feed back information back to the application, which is what we'll be looking at in the next task. Okay, we'll save these results. And commit those. And if you want to, you can do a diff and see what they look like, but we'll just go straight to task 4. Nope, I haven't saved all my changes. So commit -a, let's have a look. Right. There we go. I'm not sure why that didn't commit last time I did it. Okay, so I've checked out task 4. We'll go into our tasks list, and there's our task 4. So we're going to use callbacks on this drop-down menu to change the text in a div. So we can have a look at this web page here to see how we can use callbacks. I'll do a new tab for this one. Okay, so Leo's having some problems with the directory, so let's have a look at the directories. I've got a directory here. Make sure you don't put it in the venv directory. But put it in oh, Vince has given it the thumbs up. Does that mean Vince is having the same problem? So DataCache is here. Now when I try typing import DataCache, it comes up in my autocomplete. So you're saying you're not getting it in the autocomplete. Okay, well let's try Python console to see if we can see DataCache down there. So you're not getting in the autocomplete either. So if I run Python console and say import DataCache, that works. Oh, I see. So it's running okay, but you're getting a red line. Yeah, sometimes you just need to do something to make it trigger to actually look for it. So maybe just delete a character and then do an autocomplete and then save that, and that might get it to find it and get it to recheck. Yeah, I'm not sure why it would be complaining. It's got why Pycharm's complaining. If you're in the same directory, yes, yeah, it could raise a bug report. It's hard for me because I can't recreate the problem. I've created a fresh. This is a fresh install of Pycharm. So I wrote all this code in another user, and then I've come here as a different user, and I'm importing it as though it wasn't on the system. So I should be seeing the same problems that you are. All right. So we'll move on. What were we up to? We're up to task 4. Oh yes. So basic callbacks. So this page here explains how callbacks work. So a callback is we send out from our Python program the web page that's in front of the user, and then it when a change happens to that something on the page by the user, it will send information back to the application, and the application can work on that. So for example, in here we've got an input field with an ID called myID, and if something changes in that, then it will call this function here, update output div. And the way it knows to do that is we put this decorator on the front of it that says the input, if any of the inputs change, in this case the input it wants to look at is myID, then run this function and send the results to the output fields. And in this case that's my div. So this, anything with an @ that's called a decorator, and that updates the function in a particular way. Now a lot of stuff is happening behind the scenes that we don't need to worry about, and it's making all the JavaScript work that will allow us to for this to happen. So fortunately it gives us a structure that makes it quite easy for us to work with. They've given an example down here, so if I start typing, you can see it updates the text. And I've changed what's in the input field, and it changes what's in the output field. Okay, so we want to create a function that returns the new value of the text, and we want to use an app callback. So let's see how we can do that. All right, Leo says he's had to add to the project path before dot. Okay. And you know, it could even be a different version of Python. I'm running Python 3.8, and if you're running an earlier version, maybe this is just a new thing that happens in Python 3.8 that I haven't realized. So you could say from dot import DataCache. So that might work as well if you're having problems. Although you're saying it's running okay, you're just getting so if you're getting an error message but it's running okay, that normally means that you've configured Pycharm to test for one version of Python, even though you're running on a different version of Python. And that, although it sounds like silly, when would you ever want to do that? There are times you want to do that because you want to, if you want to make sure your code is compatible for lots of different versions of Python, then you tell Pycharm to test for an older version of Python, even though what you're currently running is a later version. And so that sounds like the sort of error you're getting here, where you're getting the red line, but it's still running okay. And where you set that is in your preferences. And I'm not sure where it is. So Leo's running 3.7, but he could be testing for an earlier version. Yep. I'll have a look later when we're doing the task, and I'll see if I can find it. Okay, task 4. So we'll copy the task over here. We're going to put something in here. Oh, one thing I should mention in this app.layout, it's got all this indentation, and normally Python's really fussy about indentation, but really all this stuff could be on one line, and once you've started a line and you've opened brackets or parentheses or something, Python is actually pretty easy about how you do your indentation. So it can this is just one form of indentation. You could do other sorts, and it's not affecting the program flow, because the program is not going to do anything until once it hits that first parenthesis, it's not going to do anything until it reaches the closing parenthesis. So even in the middle of all that, I'm going to put some comments so we know what we're trying to do. Okay, create an HTML div with the initial text empty. Okay, so the div, the first field is going to be children, and the text is just going to be empty. And we want it to have an ID of text selected country. So this children, it can be a string if it's just the text you want to show, or it can be a list of other components that you want to include in that div. So it's pretty flexible what you can do with that children field parameter. Okay, so we've done that. Create a function which takes the country name and returns you have selected country. Okay, so down here we'll create a function. We'll call it update selected country. It takes one parameter, which will be the country, and returns selected, and I'll just use a format string for that. Country. Okay, use the @callback decorator to call the function when value of input country changes. Okay, so this takes the output, and the output is going to be, we haven't imported output yet, so I'll do it just here so you can see it at the same time. From dash dependencies, from dash import, input, and output. I'll just go to the web page and make sure I got that right. Dash dot dependencies. That's right. So that will go at the top of your file, and then I can do, and the output is going to say I've got to give the component ID that I want changed. So that's telling me component ID, and so what I want to change is text selected country. And the component property that I want changed, because it can have several. In this one, it's only, we're going to use children as the property that's going to be changed. Okay. And then the next is going to be a list of inputs that can affect this. So the thing that's going to change it is going to be the component ID is the input country. Just make this a bit lower. And it's the value of that drop-down input country that we're interested in. So in this list, we've got one input. So in our parameter list for the function, we need to have one input there. So whatever is the value of input country will get put in that first parameter, which is called country, and then it will be used in here. Whatever gets returned from here will get sent to the output and put into the children of text selected country. Okay. I don't need any of that. Stores the result in. Yep, I think we've done everything. So let's go have a look at our web application. How's it going? You see it's got all these error messages, failed to fetch. So we must have had we've had an error at some stage, and that's caused it to stop working. So if I scroll down here, yep, module not found, no module name dash underscore dependencies, because it was supposed to be dash dot dependencies, and that stopped the program. So we have to start it up again. I can just click on the run here. That's right, and we'll go back and see if there we go, it's picked up, and we'll choose Albania. It says you have selected Albania. Angola, you have selected Angola. So just by clicking on that web page, it's sending a message way back to our Python program that's running in the background on our server, and that Python program is said, I want to update part of the web page, and it's sent that part of the web page that it wants updated back to the client, and it's updated that string there. So how are people going with that? Did you manage to get that bit running? I'll give you, so I'll show you the code. And remember this bit here, you normally put all your imports at the top, but I'll just leave it there for the moment so that you can see it all at once. And while you're looking at that, I'll just have a quick look. So feel free to ask any questions. Okay, let's move on. No questions on that. So we'll save our save what we're doing. So we can do that from, here we go, I'll do it in Pycharm this time. So we want to check out a new branch called my task 4 attempt. So I'll say git branches, and this time we want a new branch, my task 4 attempt, and that will check it out as well as creating it. And then I'll go to local changes, and there we go, I can see all the local changes. So they're the changes that I've made. And so I'm going to commit those. So I can click on the tick to say commit those files, and I put my message in here. So it's just calling the command line like we were doing before. That's committed that. And then if I look at the log, so currently I've got on looking at all branches, and I can see now we want to go to this one here. If I hover over that, it says task 5, so I can check that one out. Check out, and you see I can check it out by its task name, or I can also check it out by this hash code. So every one of these commits has a hash code. You can see the hash code down here, and so let's check that one out by the hash code. So just check out revision DC4. There we go. So just check. We can see where we currently are. We've got the yellow tag here. That's our head, and it's at the same place as task 5 tag, and the exclamation mark just probably means we're detached. Okay. All right. So here's our task 5. Use the selected country to filter drop-down for states. So we're going to create a new drop-down for states, but we only want to show the states for the selected country. So we're going to create an HTML label with the text state and province. We're going to create another drop-down, and we're going to have a function that changes the value. When the value of input country changes, it changes the list of states that we require. Okay, let's see if we can do that. So let's copy this. Into here. Okay, I'll put it in here. So I'll put these right next to each other. It's going to be pretty similar to the country one, so I can just copy and paste that. So you see for the HTML label, I've got this HTML4 input state. That's just good practice when you're doing HTML to say this is the label for whatever it is. And that helps for screen readers and other accessibility issues when you're designing websites. But this is the ID that's doing most of the work. Input state, we're going to be calling it. The value is going to start off with nothing. And when we first start it up, we just give it the empty list. So it'll have no options in the input state. All right, option, okay. Now we're going to call a function when the value of input country changes. So let's say at app. So this app in our callback, that's just this app here that we've created. So if we'd called that a different name, then this we'd use a different name here. .callback. Okay, and the output is going to be the input state. And we want to change the options, which is currently just an empty list. And input's always a list. The input's going to be if the input country changes, and we're interested in the value of the input country. Okay. Define update AR state. That'll do. So we need to know what the country is. Store results in options in input state. Yep. Change text selected country. Okay. So what have we got? We're going to have a data frame. We'll just copy the code that we had up here. So we've got the DF for case type. Well, let's store the DF for the moment. For case type. Now, we may not have any country, in which case we'll just return all the states. But if the country is there, then we'll say DF equals DF, and we'll filter that. I think it's called state province. In fact, it's called country region. We're interested in the state province later. Okay. Okay. And then we want the states. State province. And we need the unique values of that, but we also need to drop any NAs because sometimes we have some not numbers in the state field, and unique. Then we'll sort them, and we'll return. I will return the options, which is going to be, we use dictionary or list comprehension, so it'll be like this. Okay. So Leos are, so decorators can be used just with the same file or between files too. So the decorators, if you had several Python files in your that were all drawing parts of these dash programs, this dash pages, and they all needed to refer to app, then you would have to import app from one to the other, and then you could use it and use the app.callback that way. But that variable would have to exist in each one for you to do that. Okay. Input state. So now we've got two inputs. We're going to have two parameters here. And we're going to create a function called update text select country, take two, and you have done that. And we want to create a function in utilities.py called location name, which takes a country and a state and returns the location name. Okay, so this is teaching a bit about modules. We're going to create a new module over here. It'll be a Python file called utilities.py. We'll add it into Git, and it's going to have a function called location name. And really, there's different ways you can do this. So we want it to say, if it's just the country, we just say want Australia. If it's just the state, we just want the state. If it's both the country and the state, then we want to say Queensland-Australia. And if it's nothing, then we'll say everywhere, because we'll show everywhere. So let's see, we'll put them into a list. I'll create an empty list. If we've got a state, then we'll append that to the list. If we've got a country, then we'll append that to the list. Okay. If the length of the list equals 0, I'll just return everywhere. Else return, we'll put a dash, we'll join them with a dash, dot join all the elements of the list. We'll see how that goes. So you can write your own function there. You don't even have to go that fancy. You can just say return country and state and use a format string or something like that. But it'd be good to say everywhere if you haven't got a country or a state. Then we can import that here. Utilities. And we'll just say return if you have selected, and then in our format string, utilities dot location name country state. And I don't need all of that. Okay. There we go, haven't got any errors, no errors yet. There we go, it's saying you have selected everywhere, that's a good sign. Nothing in the state. Let's choose Australia. And we're getting an error when we've chosen a country. So, country value. Let's just put some debugging in here. So we'll do F country, and df.shape. And we'll do it again here. So I've saved that. So it's taking country, so 264101, and we're not getting any states out of that. State, province. Okay, let's print df.head. Not getting into there. Province state, not state province. That's looking better. So I choose Australia, and there's our states for Australia. You've selected Queensland, Australia. I think we've done all of that. Any questions on that task? So we're starting to get quite involved now. Yes, so yeah, Leo said utilities is a dangerous choice of name for a package. So that's true. I'm not using Anaconda. It's one of the advantages of keeping a virtual environment small is that you have fewer name clashes. We've only got in it the ones that we've deliberately put in there. But if you're using Anaconda, you'll have a lot of third-party packages. So maybe, yeah, call it something else. And maybe you can use that from .import utilities, and that will import it from the local directory. No, from dot doesn't work. So you use from dot when you're in a package, but we're not in a package, we've just got a bunch of modules. Yeah, so the only solution will be to change its name. All right, any other questions? So let's save that, and I can just do these all in one hit. We'll see how we go. Yep. And let's have a look at what the solution was. So, yep, import utilities is up the top. Update IR state. So if there's a country specified, then filter on that country, otherwise, and then sort by province state. In this case, we've just gone straight. So we did it slightly differently to the actual answer that I did yesterday or the other day. So there's many different ways to do this. And our update text selected country did that the same way. All right, let's look at task 6. Draw the COVID days doubling chart based on selected country and state. So you remember from Meetup 53, we created a chart that showed the number of days to double, or the number of days it's been doubling the number of confirmed cases. So we're going to add that graph object with an ID of graph doubling days to our HTML. And then we're going to add a function called updateGraph that will, based on the country and state, return a figure based on that country and state. Okay, it's going to be based on country and state, and then commit the changes. Okay, so we've got, I'll just copy this first. This file has been created for you. So this has just taken all the code that we had in Meetup 53. It's rearranged it a little bit so that it can use our utilities, so it can get the name. But really all this stuff we created in Meetup 53. So if you're interested in how to create this, go back to Meetup 53 and see how that got created. But for now, we can just include it into our bpaml-dash-graph module. So we'll do it here, we'll do it after the state's been chosen. Okay, so what do I want? So we're in our list of children for this outer div that's containing everything. We're going to create a graph object, so that's dcc.graph. It's going to have, it's a bit hard to read, isn't it? An ID of graph doubling days. And it's going to have the figure is going to be the figure for location. All right, but we have to import figure.for location from figure cumulative doubling. So I'm going to do that one at the top. Import figure cumulative doubling, and then we can just say figure cumulative doubling dot figure for location. That's the one. And so that's going to be the initial value, which is going to have all the data in it. Okay. Let's have a look, see if anything's changed on our web page. No, nothing there yet. Oh, yep, there we go. So it's drawing already. Based on, that's just on the everywhere data, but it's not using these selectors at all. So if we choose a selector, it doesn't change anything. And the reason is we haven't done our callbacks yet. So let's do the callbacks. So the output is going to be this graph object. So that's graph doubling days. And we want to change the figure. And the input is going to be country and state. So I can just use this, the values for country and state. Okay. And we'll create a function called updateFigure that takes a country and a state and returns country. We're going to do the data. Country. I like putting, when it's starting at a few parameters, I like to put them all in. State equals state. As named. I like to put them in named. So just stops particular errors showing up when you get the order wrong. Okay, let's have a look. Callback error. Module object is not callable. Of course, .fig for location. There you go. And that's probably, oh, it's still running. Yeah, that's good. There we go. So we chose Australia. It shows the curves for Australia. We can remove some of these doubling days. And we can choose Queensland. Let's have a look at Queensland. There we go. And once again, have to remove the doubling days. And you can even hover over here. So see April 27, number of cases 1,033. April 26, 1,030. April 25, 1,026. So it's just 3 or 4 new cases each day. No new cases for a while there. It's looking good. Okay, so I'll leave that for you just for a couple of minutes to type in if you want to try that. Are there any questions about getting the chart to work and for it to take information from the state and the country? So I'm not giving you a lot of time for writing this all in or for working it out yourself, but I'm sort of giving you a rundown of how to do it. And then if you want to, you could try replaying the video back and pausing it at the spot where it's time to do it, and then try doing it yourself once you've seen, you've watched me how to do it. And you can see what I'm doing is I'm just taking the steps in each task, breaking it down to very small steps that are each part is not that hard to do, and then it makes what seems like quite a difficult problem, it makes it achievable. Okay, so we'll move on. Let's save those. So up to task 7. So we want to provide an input and a callback for averaged days. So we want it to select a number between 1 and 10. We're going to use a slider object for this one. So if you go to the callbacks page on the documentation, it'll tell you how to set up a slider. And we want to modify update graph to take that additional parameter and commit the changes. Okay, so we'll copy that into here. We're going to do, oh yeah, so looking at the solution here, I've put the graph on top of the drop downs, and that's that's going to help in the future because we're going to have a lot more fields here for putting data in. So now after state, we'll do the slider. Okay, so I'll create a label and we'll call it averaged, what are we calling it? Average days. Oh, yeah. And we'll give it HTML4 input averaged days. Now you can see I've used dashes in my HTML IDs and names, and the reason I've done that is to not get them confused with the Python ones where you can't use a dash in a Python variable name because it looks like a minus sign. So we need to set a min value. So we'll have the min value of 1. We'll set a maximum value of 10. We'll set an initial value of 5. I think, does it say? No, so we can use 5. And then marks. So you can see what marks has got to look like. It's got to be a dictionary of pretty much labels and values. So we can do that using dictionary comprehension. So string of I, colon, string of I, for I in range 10. Okay, now range 10 actually goes from 0 to 9, so that should actually be string of I plus 1. And that should be string of I plus 1. Modify update graph to take an additional argument averaged days. Okay, update graph. Okay. Now you can see I've put default values here. I don't actually need to do that. And because I've put default values here, it's complaining that I haven't got a default value on this one. So I'll take them all off. Okay. Average days equals average days. And that should really be country equals country, state equals state. Oh, and the global data, yes. I forgot to specify that before as global, but because I hadn't set it to anything, it will assume it's global. So that's working. So that's our update graph function. Okay. Let's have a look what that looks like. Average days, and now I can move that, and you see as I change the number of days, it changes this as the days to double averaged over the last 7 days. So, and let's look at that for Australia. There we go, it's looking good. Days to double averaged, so we're up to 330 days to double our cases. So that's a lot better than in the early days when we were down at doubling every 3 days. Okay, let's see how much of this I can fit on the screen. I'll just copy and paste this up to the top. All right, any questions about task 7? No. So I'll keep working through them. there we're just going to add a couple more inputs to our graph. That's right, that's task 7. And I should have done so I didn't actually give you the commands for this one, so let's go 7, 7, 8. Anyway, we'll check out task 8. Copy, paste. Yep, that worked. And there's task 8. Provide a callback for starting number. Okay. Let's have a go at this one. So we're going to use an input object. Let's just do no, not HTML input, HTML label. So it's going to be called starting number. And we're going to use the input from dash core components. Okay, it's going to have an ID. And we'll call it input num start. We'll go from min equals 1, value equals 100, and type equals number. So by being a number type, we get little arrows to modify it up or down a little bit. And we're going to take an additional argument num start. So once again, I'll put this up the top where we can use it and see where we've been working. So when Dash calls back our callback functions, it actually provides every field each time. So that's why we didn't need to put defaults in here. Num start equals num start. So let's have a look at how that looks. Starting from 100, and here's our starting number here. We can say, well, let's start when we get to 50 cases. And there we go, confirm cases everywhere starting from 50. So that just works out where this starting point's going to be. So if we said, well, let's start at 10,000, it now starts from there at 10,000 and works up from there. Now look at this, we got an error. When I changed that from 50 to 10,000, there was a time when it actually had nothing in it. And so when that's blank, we get an error and it doesn't know what to do. So it's going starting from 1. Well, that's not much good. Well, and the reason it's saying 1 is because that was the last valid value it had. So let's look at our code and see if we can get rid of that error. So what it's doing is it's sending a value back to input numstart, which is actually the empty string. And so numstart is trying to send an empty string off to fig for location, which is expecting a number. So what we'd really want to happen in that case is we want it to not send anything, because we want it to use the default value. If we look at fig for location, it's got a default value of 100. So when we're here, we want to use that default value if we don't have a parameter come through. You can see here the default value is 100. But how do we do that? Like, we could say if numstart is a value, then we return this. Otherwise, we return that with the same parameters but without the numstart parameter. And that will work in this case because we've only got one that can be an optional, because every other one of these inputs, they're drop downs. So one of the drop downs has to be selected, or even none. If there's none selected, none is actually a valid value because it means everywhere. For average days, it's impossible to select nothing. But for numstart, you can select nothing, but we want to use the default value. So what we can do in that case is, this is where we'd use our keyword arguments. So we could say parameters equals an empty dictionary. And if numstart exists, so that means if I say if numstart, if it's an empty string, that returns false. If it's a 0, it returns false. If it's a number, then it will return true. So if it's true, then we can set it in parameters equals numstart. And then when we're down here, rather than saying numstart equals numstart, we can say send the parameters that we've put into this dictionary. But we have to say, we have to expand the dictionary, and the way we expand the dictionary is use the double asterisk. So this is a case of where you could use the double asterisk for it, and it would be most useful if a lot of these inputs had null values that we then wanted to not send them and just use the defaults that our original function had. Okay. And that's still running. So starting from 100, if I'll just make that a bit smaller. So 95, 95, that's fine. Start from 9, 9 is fine. Now if I delete the 9, hopefully it'll go to 100. And it does, it goes to 100. So we don't get any error messages now. And it will use the default value for the chart, which is 100, if nothing is provided to it. Okay. So let's, I'll give you a bit of a minute to have a look at the code for that. So we updated that field there, and we created an input. So the input was it's a dash core component input. So it's a little bit fancier than your standard HTML input. And also don't confuse it with these inputs here. They're from dash dependencies, dash.dependencies. And we used parameters so that we could send it if it existed, but not send it if it didn't exist. So while you're looking at that, I will check out, create a new branch, my task. 8 attempt git commit dash a dash m I task 8 attempt, that'll do, and then git check out task 9. Okay, we'll just have a look at what the solution was. Yep, very similar. Okay, let's look at tasks. So we want 2 more callbacks for case type and graph type. We're going to use radio items for these. So they're just buttons where you can select one of a group. And then we're going to rearrange the layout so it looks a bit neater. And see we're running out of time, so I'll just quickly do this. Okay. Radio items, and for radio items we want ID equals input case type. Enable graph type. Radio items. Case type. Default case type is confirmed, so I'll just say value equals confirmed, and for graph type we'll say log. Okay. Options for case type are going to be that. Okay. Type in confirmed, recovered, deaths. Okay. And options for y-axis type are linear and log. Okay. Right, so I've got to update the this callback here. And these ones are always going to have a value. So I don't have to worry about doing the parameters thing for them. Case type equals case type. Y-axis type equals Y-axis type. See how that looks. So we've got case type, confirmed recovered deaths. You change that to linear. You see now the linear scale here, which means these actually look like a curve, the doubling days. All right, so that's looking all good. And now the last thing is, this is looking a bit clunky down the bottom here. So we're just going to put that into 3 columns. So to do that, we'll divide the input fields into 3 divs with styles break inside a void, all inside one div with style column count equals 3. Okay. Label style. Oh, here we go. I should put these on the radio items we've just created, so that they go across the screen rather than down the screen. Okay. That's those ones, and then this one. So the way I'll do this, I got the graph. Yeah, we'll do it here. So we'll create a div, and that will have children equals, and it's going to be an array of things, and it's also going to have a column count style. Okay, so in there we're going to do 3 divs. And each one's going to have an array of things, and it's going to have a style break inside a void. And that just means that we don't want it to break within each one of those 3 divs. So it just says what goes into the 3 columns that we're going to have. Okay. So the first div is going to have our country and state. So I'll copy and paste, or cut and paste X from there, and tab in. The second one's going to have average days and the starting number. And the third one's going to have case type and graph type. Let's have a look at what that looks like. And there we go. Let's put it all into 3 columns at the bottom. We can try choosing our different cases. We can look at how many have recovered in New South Wales. We can look at it on a linear chart. There we go. That's the end. And if you want to see what it looks like in here, just do a git checkout on master. Are there any questions? Hello? Okay, well, thanks for listening. Next week I'll be doing an absolute beginner's Python. So we're going to look at using a game. We're going to go into the mind test game, which is like Minecraft, and try to do some tasks, the Pythonated tasks. So it can be a lot of fun. Helpful if you bring a kid along who can show you how to actually play the game. And they'll be able to navigate around. And we'll all be playing in the same world, so we'll be able to see how everyone's going with their tasks at the same time. So that's going to help me quite a lot as well. Yes, Vince is going to do it all again. That's great. There was a lot covered in there that was pretty heavy going for 2 hours. But I think that it's, if you want to do a web application, this is the easiest way to get into it, and it's such a powerful thing, and they look so great when you do them. So yeah, I'd really recommend it. Yeah, if you've got any questions during the week, feel free to ask on the chat channel. I'll monitor that, and yeah, see you next week.